Good morning. I'm Davide Gobbicchi from ITSS Verona and my colleague Fabrizio Napoli from ITSS Verona. We are part of the post-USSR space. We're here today with Professor Gaufman, professor at the University of Groningen of Russian Discourse and Politics. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Today we're going to talk about Russian media and the evolution of Russian media following the invasion of Ukraine. So we're going to start with the first question, Fabrizio.
Thank you, Professor, for accepting the invitation. My first questions is about anti-Ukrainian sentiment in the Russian media sphere, and if it paved the way for Russia's violence in Ukraine over the years, because anti-Ukrainian sentiment and negative depiction of Ukraine did not start before, like short time ago, but it's ongoing since 2014. And I wonder if it was to prepare the Russian public for the current events. Thank you.
So when we talk about anti-Ukrainian sentiment in general on Russian media, we need to also talk about the difference between the state-controlled media and social media, so not necessarily controlled by the Russian government. And there has been some anti-Ukrainian sentiment also before 2014. So, for example, when we take a look at the events of the Orange Revolution 2004, there was also quite a bit of pushback on Russian state-run media about this disavowal of shared history, it was called at that point in time. So this kind of, I wouldn't call it very racist Ukrainian sentiment, but there was some anti-Ukrainian sentiment at that point in time already. And this is also the time when the Russian government already test drove, so to say, the role of the Great Patriotic War in cementing the anti-Ukrainian sentiment, because that was the time when the so-called St. George's ribbon were actually used by the pro-Kremlin youth movements. And when we flash forward to 2013, actually, so this is when the Euromaidan started in Ukraine, and this is what created quite a bit of anxiety among the Russian political elite, because they saw that what they thought was the pro-Russian governmental control in Ukraine was slipping, and they thought that their own special relationship with Ukraine was also slipping. And we could also see on Russian mainstream media, this is actually a time when the very much anti-Ukrainian, this whole idea of Ukrainian being neo-Nazis, this narrative, that was starting to being heavily promoted via Russian mainstream media. So you could see a lot of this footage of, let's say, right sector marches or some kind of other visual material that would indicate the Ukrainian support for neo-Nazis or Ukrainian collaborators during World War II. So this is the kind of a narrative that was very heavily emphasized on Russian state-run media. So to such an extent that the Euromaidan was actually portrayed as a neo-Nazi coup. And this is what the Russian officials obviously also emphasized in their narrative around Euromaidan in 2013. And that obviously created a massive, massive amount of anti-Ukrainian sentiment among the Russian public, because the Great Patriotic War, as World War II is called in Russia, is a massive, massive traumatic event in the Russian history. And it is very successfully used in state nation building efforts in post-Soviet Russia, because it was seen as a universally positive event in Russian history. So it was used to legitimize a lot of policies, specifically in relation to Ukraine. It was also used to shore up Putin's personal legitimacy and the legitimacy of the Russian state in general. The way it worked to an extent was also to fill out some of the great power vacuum that that existed since the collapse of Soviet Union, because a lot of people actually felt like their sense of belonging to a great nation was lost. So now with the renewed effort of World War II commemoration, this kind of sense of belonging to a great nation was restored to an extent, and it was very much connected to Putin's effort and his government effort to restore this sense of belonging to a great nation. And that something that we can also see on social media as well, and mainstream media, that in the wake of Crimea annexation, you can see a massive amount of this fascism and rhetoric. So the government was really trying to connect the whole idea of Crimea annexation and Russian army involvement in Donbass with the idea of the Great Patriotic War and the commemoration of the Great Patriotic War. So they portrayed as, so to say, World War II 2.0, where you had to protect Russian speakers and Russians specifically from an existential threat of Nazis, and obviously the Ukrainians were supposed to be the Nazis in this scenario. So this kind of narrative stayed on for a while. So it was dialed down after 2015, especially after the MH17 airliner was shot over Ukraine, and so that, but still that died down a little bit, its narrative, but. Especially when this the buildup of troops was started in 2021, that's when this narrative also made a comeback on mainstream media, a more widespread comeback on mainstream media. And then right before the invasion, about in January 2022 and in February 2022, you could also see quite a bit of rhetoric on Russian state-run media on genocide as well. So genocide started making rounds on pro-governmental media, and this is also something that for media experts was extremely worrying, because that's this kind of legitimation was something that was a sign for us that there was something that was that the Russian government was preparing some kind of military action. Obviously, we could not have predicted what was the extent of the military action that was being prepared at that point in time, and not a lot of people could have predicted that as well, apart from some military experts. But already in January, it was very worrying based on the media narrative that we saw on state-controlled media in Russia. And then I think that when the war actually became inevitable based on the rhetoric that was perpetrated by the Russian government was on at the Putin speech on the 21st of February, when he recognized the two republics.
Thank you. It was a very comprehensive answer. I would now like to move from domestic policies into international politics and ask you the role of Russia's media manipulation abroad. We have seen, especially in the European Union, there have been several interventions of Russian major officers in both traditional media as well as social media. So what is the role of Russia's propaganda machine in foreign media, and how is it connected to its international politics?
The thing is, it's very hard to assess the actual effect of propaganda. So what I've been doing with my colleagues, we've been looking at the so-called Kremlin troll accounts. So this is for those of you who haven't heard of that before, so Kremlin trolls are the actual employers of Internet Research Agency, which is a company that operates out of St. Petersburg. So this company pretty much employs people who would post pro-governmental content on social media and different websites. So they have existed for several years now. There were some quite astonishing revelations in late 2010s about the way they work, about the kind of guidelines they receive, what kind of contents that they're supposed to post. So we already know sort of how they operate, and there have also been some attempts to expose or block even the accounts, especially on Twitter, that are associated with the Internet Research Agency. So now, for example, we have access to several data sets that Twitter has released that were affiliated with the Internet Research Agency, and we can actually look at what they have been doing in different languages. So most of the research has actually concentrated on the English language troll accounts, because the the biggest interest was actually related to Russian interference in American elections in 2016. So that's what was the main focus and interest that the researchers had. But now I think that more and more researchers realizing that the troll accounts and this trolling actually goes way beyond the English-speaking Twitterverse, and now people looking into other languages as well. So, for example, we are now also looking into comparing what is the difference between, let's say, English-speaking and Russian-speaking propaganda they're trying to push. And there's actually quite a bit of difference, because if we take a look at the English-speaking troll accounts from, let's say, 2017, 2018, we see a lot of them are kind of just trying to masquerade as far left or far right accounts in the US. So some of them successfully, some of them unsuccessfully. A lot of them are trying to pretend to be Black voters. So it's a kind of digital blackface in many ways, digital black sock puppets even. So this is quite disturbing in many ways what they're trying to do. But again, we cannot really assess whether these accounts with this kind of content manage to influence other people's point of view, because their main purpose was to blend in with regular people. And to an extent they managed to do that, especially with the far right accounts. So the far right accounts, they probably did the better job of blending in, because some of the accounts even were quoted by American mainstream media. So that was such a good masquerade of the right-wing sentiment. At the same time, when we take a look at the Russian language accounts, especially from 2017, 2018, so there was actually beyond the active phase of the first war. So it was not an active phase of military hostilities in Donbass region, right? So this is actually, we can still see very, very similar narratives that were pushed by the Russian state-controlled media in 2014 and 2015. So there was pretty much the same stuff that you can see there. So they were talking about Ukrainian Nazis. They were trying to capitalize on the memory of the Great Patriotic War. They're trying to pretty much, they're repeating over and over the same things. And at that point in time was kind of even bewildering. Why are they still doing that? If you want to listen to that kind of rhetoric, you can just switch on Russian TV. You'll hear exactly the same stuff, just in smaller portions. So this was actually the main difference. And now, obviously, with the war, we can see that this rhetoric and this long-term rhetoric is quite useful. And that's why, for the Kremlin, obviously, and how they actually even trying to capitalize on it. And I can even see that some of those trolls might be quite frustrated that they've been talking about the same stuff for 8 years and nobody really paid attention to them that much. So now that's probably where even the narrative, where have you been for this 8 years? Why didn't you care about Donbass before, when there was a war there, but now you care about the war with Ukraine? So this is actually one of the main narratives that the Kremlin is trying to push. And that's also kind of the pushback that you might receive from some people in Russia when you confront them with the war in Ukraine right now. So it's like, oh, well, you didn't care about Donbass for 8 years, so now why you care? So this is one of the main kind of pushbacks that you hear from regular people as well. Another issue when it comes, what has been also really left out by researchers is the fact that the troll accounts do not just target people in the West, they also, or in Russia, they also target people in global South. And right now it's actually where a lot of their operations actually concentrating on African countries, East Asia, India. So you can see actually, or Latin American, you can see actually some of those clusters of IRA trolls, so the Kremlin trolls, that are trying to push quite successfully, actually, a lot of the rhetoric that is based on whataboutism logic. So what about something? So whataboutism is pretty much a very Soviet tool in many ways that the Russian government has used, that when it was accused, let's say the Soviet Union was accused of human rights abuses, and they say, oh, but what about you? Like, you did something wrong as well. And this is actually the kind of narrative that's quite common, for example, among the African countries, when you can see, so why did European Union not let in Syrian refugees, but now they're welcoming Ukrainians with open arms? So this is a legit criticism. Obviously, Syrian refugees were not met with the same welcoming arms as Ukrainian refugees are. It doesn't mean that Ukrainian refugees should not be welcomed. It means that all refugees should be welcomed. And but by kind of exposing this double standard in the way refugees are treated, they obviously they're striking up a chord with a lot of people in Global South who face real life racism when they actually interact with Global North countries. So this is quite a successful tactic in many ways. Another issue here is also that a lot of Global South countries can really get on board on anti-imperialist rhetoric and anti-American rhetoric. So a lot of those comparisons that are being made right now for Global South countries are related to the fact that American foreign policy has been quite imperialist. They invaded so many countries and nobody bat an eye, but now that Russia is invading, then everybody's suddenly very much outraged. So this kind of double standard issue is also something that actually goes down quite well in a lot of Global South countries that also experienced imperialism and colonization. So this is something that can also resonate quite well. And I think that going forward, actually, this should be the focus of disinformation and social media researchers, and see how also Global South countries are affected by this kind of policies, because so far, most of the articles, by far, the vast majority of the articles that I've seen have focused on the Russian troll attempts to undermine election legitimacy in the US in 2016 or 2020.
If I might stretch here just a bit, how would this sort of Russification of media in the Global South reflect power equilibriums in the UN? Would this eventually move Global South countries within the UN towards Russian politics or Russian-backed actions, and move them away from Western actions from which most Global South plans nowadays?
It's hard for me to predict that, obviously, but I would draw your attention to the statement that was made by a Kenyan ambassador to the UN about the invasion of Ukraine. So this was a fantastic statement. I showed it to my students as well, where he talked about how for the sake of peace, a lot of African countries actually accepted the borders that were drawn by colonial powers. And this is something that prevented a lot of the countries actually from contesting those borders, because they did not want more deaths and casualties. So, and this kind of contesting of post-Soviet orders, so pretty much contesting the borders that were that emerged after the collapse of Soviet Union, led to so many casualties in the war. So this is pretty much an imperial war in many ways, and this an imperial and colonial war in many ways. So I think that is something that a lot of countries in the Global South can definitely connect with. It. They can definitely have sympathy for the fact that the Ukraine is being a victim of that type of war that they have been subjected to as well in their history. So I don't know what will happen in the UN next, because obviously we can see that there has been a lot of imbalance in the way great powers are treated and lesser powers are treated by the UN in terms of sanctions, in terms of even referrals to the, let's say, even International Criminal Court in the prosecutions that took place there. So that's why it's quite hard to see what will happen next, especially if the war in Ukraine will continue.
Thank you. Now I want to make the final question, which is about the crackdown on domestic media in Russia, because I have the impression that it was something like a process too quick, especially when we look at the internet sphere, because nowadays I suppose that it's very difficult to get information in Russia. but it was not a few months ago. So I have the perception that the Russian public was actually accustomed to grasp information in the internet. So I want to know how much is successful the crackdown on media in Russia, especially in the web sphere, and which instruments Russia is using now to promote the war in Ukraine. For instance, I don't know, television, the church, and whatever you think is relevant. And most of all, if they are successful in shaping Russia's public opinion. Thanks for...
Okay, so this is a very big question, but I'll try to kind of answer it in chunks. So I'll just get something out of the way, which is the role of the church. And in fact, the Russian Orthodox Church, and specifically Patriarch of Russia, Kirill, has been quite supportive of the war in general. And he has actually framed it in such a way as the defending Donbas peoples. Obviously, he does not call it war, he calls it special operation, defending Donbas people from gay pride parades. And I'm paraphrasing here only very lightly. So he's pretty much talking about this very civilizational struggle between the West and the proper traditional values that Russia represents, and protecting Donbas people from the corrupt Western values. So this is the framing that the Russian Orthodox is taking up, the Russian Orthodox Church has taken up, and this also has created quite a bit of rift with the Orthodox communities abroad. Let's say here in Amsterdam, actually they no longer want to be part of the Russian Orthodox Church because of this kind of framing, because of the fact that that here people do not support the war and they don't want to be a part of that that rhetoric as well. So and obviously a lot of Ukrainian churches that have been a part of the Moscow Patriarchate, they also have been quite vocal about their indignation and Kirill's support for the war. So that has created quite a bit of rift there. So I don't think, because if there's quite a low level of religiosity in Russia specifically there, I don't think that a lot of these narratives actually resonating with the Russian population. I think they would resonate way less than a lot of this neo-Nazi talk, which is much more embedded in the Russian culture at this point. So that's why it is the more kind of the Ukrainians are Nazis narrative that is being pushed by Russian TV. And Russian TV has always been like the main tool in the Russian government's effort to legitimize itself and legitimize the war in Ukraine or the annexation of Crimea, because the amount of people that are actually getting their information from TV is slipping, so it's going down now, and especially the amount of people who actually trust TV has also gone significantly down since the start of the war. I think that obviously there are a lot of public opinion polls that are being done in Russia. I would not necessarily trust their data, but there's one piece of data that I would trust, and when people were asked about whether they trust TV, and the number of people who do went down to 23%. So that's the kind of, so this is not against the law to say that. Obviously right now it's against the law in Russia to use the word war in relation to Ukraine, to say no to fascism, no to war. So this is the kind of stuff that you can get punished for with the, you could be criminally prosecuted for that. But saying that you don't trust TV is not something you can get punished for. So that's why I would actually tend to trust that kind of number in the Russian public opinion polls. So another issue here is obviously since the start of the war, the Kremlin has used a lot of repressive tactics to subjugate the media space. So a lot of every single oppositional outlet has been blocked on the Russian territory. So there is no non-state controlled media that actually operate on the Russian territory legally. So obviously you have some regional, for example, newspapers that that sometimes publish something that's something vaguely anti-war, especially when it comes to the burial or funerals of Russian soldiers, and that actually comes off quite Kremlin well, critical of the Kremlin, and sometimes those materials actually blocked kind of surgically. So not the entire outlet is blocked, but those materials have to be removed from the website, for example. So this is something that is still happening among the more local media newspapers. So right now, you probably know that Facebook, Instagram are blocked on the Russian territory. WhatsApp is not blocked, even though the parent company is the same, but Instagram and Facebook are still accessible via VPN. And actually, if you take a look at the most common or most popular apps that are being downloaded on Russian digital stores, it's some type of VPN program. So people are downloading it in Russia. They're using it increasingly. Also, what you cannot block is, let's say, if you have, for example, BBC Russia is no longer available in Russia, but if you have a BBC app on your phone, the government cannot prevent you from using it yet, at least. So this is also the way you can get some information. Like another very oppositional news outlet, Medusa, also has an app, has a emailing has like a mailing service, so that can also technically not be blocked yet. So another issue here is that a lot of social networks that are in fact available, let's say Vkontakte, it's very heavily policed by the Russian government. So a lot of the prosecutions for so-called likes and reposts, they have actually happened on the basis of the data provided by Vkontakte, because they cooperate very significantly with the Russian security services. Another place where you can have a lot of unfettered information is actually Telegram. So you probably know the app, and I'm sure it's under some kind of supervision by the Russian security services, but because so far we don't know of their significant cooperation. So also because all the channels are open, so you can actually read. So this is kind of public information in many ways. So. And there are also some ways to scrape Telegram and work with this data, but I haven't seen major studies that actually worked with the scrape data related to the Russian propaganda yet. So another issue is obviously the fact that there's a massive amount of prosecution that is happening right now in Russia against people who try to resist the war. So you have, I think at this point, 7 or 8 new laws that are supposed to target people who are against the war. So there's a law, for example, about spreading fakes about the Russian army. That is can be very widely interpreted. There is also a law about discrediting Russian armed forces that again can be interpreted very broadly. There is and for example, if you hold up a sausage, it can also be considered anti-war and discrediting Russian armed forces, because the sausage is produced by a company called Miratorg, and Mir in Russian is peace. So that's considered an anti-war statement, and then people are being arrested and taken away. You can even hold up Leo Tolstoy's book, and then already can be seen as war and peace. So now there people are making jokes that Tolstoy wrote a book, Special Operation and Peace. So this is a lot of this kind of stuff is quite common right now in Russia. And because people are still kind of used to things like Instagram, especially Instagram was extremely popular in Russia. A lot of people are still using it with the VPNs, but and the user base fell by about 15 to 30%. So it's different estimates right now. So it's quite difficult to assess whether the information is actually getting through to people via these channels or not. And another issue here is that we have YouTube still, although there were quite a bit of fears about YouTube being closed down on the Russian territory. Several channels already have been blocked for years now. Navalny, for example, Navalny's channels have been blocked on the Russian territory many times. But the Russian government actually created an analog of YouTube that's called RuTube. which has been hacked also, and it's by far it does not have the capacity to host all the content or the user base that YouTube can. So there's quite a bit of I think that the Russian government is probably hesitating about blocking YouTube because it would create a massive gap in access to actual entertainment for the Russian population. And this is something that I'm not sure that they're ready to do, at least at this moment. So the media freedom in Russia is very, very restricted right now. It's very, very difficult to get any alternative information. Obviously, if you want to find alternative information, you'll be able to. But in many ways, you are bombarded and surrounded by a lot of pro-governmental rhetoric. So even if you open your newspapers, print newspapers, they're extremely pro-war. You switch on TV, it's extremely pro-war. You open accessible social media, and then you'll be also bombarded with a lot of like trending topics on Kontakte that would be also, everything would be pro-war. So it's very hard to get away from that kind of from this kind of rhetoric right now in Russia, especially if you are not purposefully seeking out different information.
Okay, I'm afraid our time is almost up. So, Fabrizio, have you got something else you would like to add?
No, I'm fine. I think that all the answers were very interesting and
very comprehensive way.
Comprehensive, yeah.
So I would like to thank you, Professor Gaufman. On behalf of ITSS Verona, I would like to thank you, and I think we can stop here.